before we start, there's a member of the public over there. Okay, so. Huh? No. So what I didn't tell you is that I was trying to make sure that we didn't put the escrow down. Like, I didn't want to take a big deal, but yes. Well, and also we we asked her for her name. She gave 3 different names, and we Googled. There we go.
We can hear you.
David, who can you hear?
Well, I can hear you now, Ed.
Outstanding. All right, we're going to get started again from the top.
All right, taking it from the, do we have to reintroduce? We're a public meeting or no?
No, I'll just say that.
Okay, okay.
I guess I just said it. Actually, let's get everyone seated. Thumbs up. Okay, I apologize for our audience that we had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we're back now. So we're going to get started with our third day. I just want to welcome all the members back. We've had a couple of great days, and we're going to wrap up as scheduled on our public notice and agenda by noon Eastern time today. Just a quick reminder again to everyone, the board members as well as the members of the public, that this is a Federal Advisory Committee meeting, Environmental Financial Advisory Board. This is our first meeting, January meeting of 2023. And this is our third day. So I'm not going to say anything more about that other than to say it's a public meeting, and I'll turn it over to you, Carrie.
Great. All right, welcome back, everybody. All right, let's do this again. Let's start with the member roll call, and then we'll get into it. Ashley.
Present. Ashley Ellen Jones, I2 Capital.
Great. Welcome back, Courtney.
Courtney Black, City of Kent, Washington here.
Super. Steve. Virtually.
Steve is on.
Steve is on. Okay. Great. That's Steve Bonafonte. Angela.
Angela Montoya Brickmont from Denver Water, present.
Great. Matt.
Matt Brown, DC Water, present.
Stacy.
Stacy Brown, Freeburg Environmental, present.
Al.
Al Cho from Xylem, present.
Janet.
Janet Clemens, One Water Econ, present.
Lori.
Lori Collins, Collins Climate Consulting, present.
Zach. Online.
Zach is online, yes.
Okay. And they can talk. Jeff. Oh, Jeff Deal is absent today. Sonia. Sonia's absent. Phyllis.
Phyllis Garcia, San Antonio Water System, present.
Great. Eric Hangen and Ted Hennepin are absent. Barry.
Barry Hirsch, NYU, here.
Great. Craig Holland is absent. Craig.
Craig Rankovich from Baird.
Margot.
Margot Kane, Spring Point Partners.
Say Marco Polo. Tom, online. Tom is absent. George Kelly is absent this morning. Gwen,
I'm online today. I just sent all of you a message. I had hoped to be in person, but had to switch to online.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gwen. Cynthia.
Cynthia Kohler, Water Now Alliance, present.
Great to see you in person, Cynthia. Colleen.
Colleen Kokas, Environmental Liability Transfer.
Great. Joanne Landau, I think, is going to be joining at 10. Oh, she is on. Okay.
I actually am here. Yes. Good morning, everybody. Joanne Landau, Kurt Sam Realty.
Great, Joanne. Lawrence is absent. Okay. Mariana.
Mariana Peavy, Idaho Department of Environmental Quality.
Dennis.
Dennis Randolph, City of Kalamazoo, present.
Eric.
Eric Rothstein, Gallardi Rothstein Group.
Great. Sanjeev is on a flight. Bill.
Bill Stannard with Raft House Financial Consultants.
Great. And Marilyn, I believe, is also unable to. Oh, Marilyn's online. Great. Marilyn.
Hi, yes, Marilyn Wade, Climate Finance Fund, online.
Great. Thanks, Marilyn. Dave.
He just left on his flight, so he's absent today.
He is, yeah, he was here, but yeah, okay. Gwen.
Gwen Yamamoto, Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority, present.
Great. And David.
David Zimmer, New Jersey Infrastructure Bank, present.
Excellent.
And Carrie, Ted Chapman, Hilltop
Oh my
Securities.
God, I
I'm
forgot
here
Ted.
for one more day.
One more. Did I skip over it? Anyone else? Thank you, Ted. I apologize. All right, let's do a quick recap of what's been really, an action-packed and jam-packed, really productive 2 days. The first day the first day we recognized our outgoing members who will be leaving the board in June. So it was great to be able to recognize them, our 6 members, and hear some of their reflections of words of wisdom from serving on the board. Then we had, for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, we got to spend some time with our clients, Ella and Tim, to debrief and celebrate on the charge process itself. And then we got to a program update from Dan Utek and Jahi Wise on where things go from here. And then we got to hear from Faisal on the CFO update and some insights and challenges on the influx of money and what that means for oversight, but also trying to get money out to new places. I think that was very helpful as we teed up, things that happened after that. We got to hear from the charge deliverables, the previous stormwater charge, the P2 and the OZ charges on what's happened since those charges, which was fantastic. And then we got 2 briefings, one on the state revolving fund and then on the Creating Resilient Water Utilities initiative. So that was a really great day that I think speaks to the diversity of the issues that this board deals with, as EPA is a very diverse agency in terms of what it is has in its remit. And then on day 2, we got 3 just, I think, extraordinary briefings from other FACAs. We had Dr. Baptiste come talk about the really phenomenal work that the NEJAC work group is doing, in particular the finance work group, and the recommendations or the letter that will be coming to the administrator. I think so much of what the Dr. Baptiste mentioned or covered really resonated with us. We got to hear from Rod Snyder at the FRRCC on the what that advisory committee as it gets going, where we've had a lot of interest on this board, potential opportunities to overlap. And then the WEJAC, Dr. Jerome White Newsom, and the work at the White House, both CEQ and then the Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And then we had a discussion and we voted to create a new exploratory work group, pulling on these threads and themes that we've been dealing with and EPA is dealing with around how, what are the barriers and what are some ideas of how to flow money to EJ, low-income disadvantaged communities, particularly in the grant and investment space, and maybe the role of intermediaries. So that work group is now spun up and will come back to the board with a proposed charge. I know Ed will be working to find clients, and we have some ideas around that, whether it's the new Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights or the CFO office or some combination. So really excited about that.
And there's obviously what I'll follow up with is on NEJAC and WEJAC and perhaps with Dr. Baptiste's participation. I think they have a new group that's been forming on IRA. And
on
maybe
the IRA.
there's
there
possible,
could be an overlap there.
Right, some collaboration there as well.
Yes.
But more to come on
More
that.
to come. And then we teed up the Office of Water Charges and the exploratory work group and the work that they're doing to refine the charges. And so I think at this point, unless anybody has any comments on any of that, we should turn it over to Cynthia and Jana and give us an update on the work group charges.
Great. Thanks so much, Carrie. Hopefully you can all hear me. Yeah, it's working. Okay. So I'm very pleased to report that there's been terrific progress. And we've got just a wonderful work group with very dedicated and thoughtful and enthusiastic members. So the progress has been mostly on the process side, but I'm very confident that we will be getting there with the charge. It looks like 2 in fairly short order, and I want to really commend also EPA for their engagement and their involvement in working with us. So where we are is the group has now coalesced on a number of precepts. And we were given, as you said, Carrie, 9 proposed charges a few months ago. And in terms of how we should evaluate those, the work group has coalesced around these precepts that the charges should have the potential to support EPA in doing something highly impactful or even transformative with the new bill and other federal water funds, especially since this will likely be once in a generation money. Second, water affordability is a growing challenge nationwide, and EPA is positioned to help communities address this in various ways beyond serving, obviously, as a source of funds. And then third, having effective and sustainable technical assistance mechanisms to support communities is critical. So those are sort of the lenses through which we're looking at these charges. So with that, the group has now done really effective work in taking the 9 and narrowing it down to 2 broad topics. The first is equitable water affordability measures. So Janet is going to be heading up that work group, and I'll let her talk about that in a moment. And then the second one is assessing SRF effectiveness. We had a very lively conversation just this morning about effectiveness. And that charge that I'll be working with is intended to cover 3 of EPA's original charges in that list, charges 2 through 4 related to the SRF. So the process at this point is that we're going to try to get some words on the page and work through those with our 2 distinct work groups. And then, Janet and I will iterate those. And once we get those charges a little more refined, we will bring them back to the larger EFAB for what we assume will be a virtual vote. So Janet, do you want to talk about your subgroup?
Sure. Janet Clemens, One Water Econ for the record. So our subgroup is the Equitable Water Affordability Measures subgroup, and we haven't completely focused on what our charge will focus on or come up with exact language or anything, but we are kind of coalescing around that. And specifically, I think we've really honed in on EPA's original charges 6 and 8. For those of you who don't memorize the numbers, charge 6 really had to do with identifying best practices for customer assistance programs and looking into how communities fund those programs, implement those programs, and then really kind of going from there to focus on, the funding approaches and what could be used, what are potential funding sources or new approaches, including the potential for SRF financing to provide, funds for those programs. That's charge 6. We are not ignoring, but we've kind of coalesced around not explicitly including EPA's original charge 7, which really had to do with a needs assessment for low-income affordability programs. What we are focusing on or bringing in as well is charge 8, which has to do with rate structures. And similar to charge 6, it kind of starts with identifying best practices or thinking about best practices and what can be done within the boundaries of state regulations. And that applies to customer assistance programs as well. As many of you know, there's a lot of potential legal considerations that have to be taken into account when thinking about customer assistance programs, but also thinking about how rates can help affordability. And within those 2 charges, really thinking about what's EPA's role and how can they influence those 2 topics. Charge 6 takes a little bit of, or I think acknowledges, has a little bit of overlap with EPA's original charge 1, which was specifically to look at the potential for SRF financing to help fund customer assistance programs for communities that are financing large infrastructure projects through the SRF. So that will be looked at, I believe, or that's kind of what we're coalescing around for charge as part of the affordability, or what we're calling equitable water affordability measures charge. We purposely kind of expanded the title a little bit, kind of to acknowledge and potentially, include additional topics going beyond just customer assistance, not just, but going beyond customer assistance programs and rate structures, because there's just kind of recognizing there's a range of measures that should be considered and evaluated. So we're not quite to the point where we have a specific, we have EPA's original charge, and our next step is to kind of go back, pull those specific, the language from those specific charges, again, charges 6 and 8, and really hone in on the exact language and what we'll be looking at. So, and if anyone from the affordability group has anything to add to that, please jump in.
Anybody like to say more about that?
I think that's our report. I think I think the work group is, I think we've got the right people, we've got the right numbers. I think we're well underway. And I think we should be, I don't want to put a time estimate on it, but my expectation is that we'll be able to come back with some kind of proposal within the next couple of months for the larger group to consider. And I think really the next step is to get some words on the page, iterate, like I said, back and forth a bit. We really want to be as engaged as possible with the EPA clients. So just as one example, it was brought up in our conversation this morning. Again, this is on the SRF effectiveness work group in particular, that a real focus for the EPA client is the bill money. It's not just kind of the SRF programs generally, since that money is flowing through these SRF mechanisms in all 50 states. And the bill also has a number of, I think they were called sort of mini mandates. I may be getting that exactly wrong, but so EPA is going to help us out by really, giving us a list of what those are. So, for example, a certain amount of money has got to go to lead, and a certain amount has got to go to EJ communities, and so really understanding from EPA, what those mandates are, where those funds need to go specifically within the bill framework. That will really help this work group and EFAB broadly, once we get the charge, to really hone in on where we can be providing recommendations that are as useful and as effective as possible. So very grateful for EPA's engagement on that.
And we have seen over the past year or so, that there is an art to developing the charge, the give and take amongst the members of the board and our EPA clients, and what expertise do we really feel the members have to offer as a board? How does that align with what EPA's desires are? So there's always a bit of ebb and flow, and that does take time. So we appreciate you all putting the time in around that. We have time for discussion if there. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add, Cynthia and Janet, that the board, this part of the deliberations between the work group and our clients at EPA is to really ensure that what the clients are looking for really is compatible, and the board feels comfortable in terms of expertise. And also the other part that I always talk about is the independence of the board. So there's a great deal of flexibility, and I think the way that we've worked with our clients in the past have been just outstanding, which is just as you said, give and take and flexibility. So I think the Office of Water, there's the Office of Water folks there, so I'll just point to them and say, I don't think the way that the charges are given to us for the exploratory phase is not set in stone, right? So I hope that that's the kind of conversation that's going back and forth, and they're nodding back there. So I really appreciate at least the nod back from our clients as well. So it doesn't have to be the same, and I really appreciate the fact that you're picking and choosing what you think is really the best use of the EFAB bandwidth to help the Office of Water.
I really appreciate your emphasizing that. I mean, again, we're at the beginning of this, but that's exactly what we've seen. And again, very grateful for EPA's openness to that conversation. And, obviously we're here to provide them with what they need. So, I'm really looking forward to that partnership.
And And also remember you have flexibility in your deliverables too, and thinking about what the cadence of the work is and the deliverable time frame. I know we all just came off of a really intense process that is in no way meant to be a precedent. And then as a reminder for, the rest of the members who are not involved in the exploratory work group, it sounds like 2 charges will be coming forward for a vote and consideration in the coming months, then there will be an opportunity to join those specific work groups to work on the deliverables. So I know 1 or 2 folks had mentioned, oh, I wasn't on the exploratory work group. Not to worry. You can engage at that point. Ted, go ahead.
Ted Chapman, Hilltop Securities. Just for the record, I wanted to thank Janet and Cynthia for even the past couple of days, the facilitating, the synthesizing of thoughts that are coming at them at 90 miles an hour from 90 different directions. So
it's a very engaged group, I take it.
Well, we got a lot done just in the last 24 hours, and it wouldn't have happened but for their leadership of the project subgroups.
That's great. Thank you for acknowledging that.
And I just also want to add that as a DFO, I'm really focused on making sure that the time that you're volunteering on the board is used most effectively and productively. So I appreciate all of you spending time on the exploratory charge group, because this helps us determine what the workload is and clarity about the timeline and involvement that's needed for actually getting the work done with EPA. So I want to add my appreciation for that as well as for the other members who are participating.
Any other comments or discussion at this point? It's work in process, understood, totally fine. If we'll let the work groups continue, the exploratory work group continue that work. So I know Craig is absent today. Oh, yes.
In terms of timeline, and one of the other things that we're focused on the staffing this is that we will have a summer meeting, summer fall meeting that we're going to pick some dates and location. We'll have conversations around that at the end of today. But with that in mind, that's sort of the one in-person engagement that we have. And usually what we would like to do is have decisions and board-wide conversations. So working back from that, whether that date and that meeting, I would urge the work group chairs to think about how we can get the charge questions voted on and finalized, and what level of work will take place between that and the in-person meeting. Because I think Cynthia kind of gave us some indication that the exploratory work group is going to be continuing for another month or 2 of work. That takes us into mid-spring. So if you could share with us some indication, obviously you don't have to do that today, with us, that we can share with others so that the entire board is engaged in when they would expect to vote on a set of charges, the 2 charges. And if it gets to a point where we cannot do that in person, we'll have to have a virtual meeting to vote on that. And that virtual meeting will have to have some more in-depth discussions that the work groups will be reporting out on. So I just want to make sure that there's a step, right? The next step is to bring forward the charges themselves, and the board votes on that. Discusses and votes on that, which means that there has to be some product prior to that for the other members of the board, and then of course the summer meeting. So
and we can work with Tara and Ed, and I can work with you on working backwards from what that might look like.
Yeah, so on the timing, I think we were anticipating we'd have a proposed charge, I should say, and possibly some sort of virtual meeting before the summer meeting. I mean, we could push it that far out, but our impression from EPA is that given the deadlines in the bill, again, we're not looking at the same kind of, immediacy as the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund process, but I think my sense is from the level of engagement we're seeing from the work group already, that we should, I'll just go out on a limb here, but my sense is we should have something within, again, the next few months. I mean, if we don't, we don't, but that would be my soft expectation. And if we can work with the EFAB teams, to put together some sort of virtual meeting so that we can get that charge approved and moving forward, my sense is that that would be the agency, the client's preference, because there was a level of urgency.
The notice period and
the notice period,
exactly.
And
finding blocks so that we can have the discussion.
Precisely. So I think we're all on the same page about that.
Yeah, and I just don't want to be sounding all so bureaucratic, but I wanted to highlight that we have to announce our all member meetings on the Federal Register notice.
Sure.
And,
Ashley remembers this from P2, working back from the federal for our webinar series.
Right. Yeah. So we have that in mind. We know it takes about 3 weeks with the notice and all that. So we'll bear that in mind. But I do also want to be responsive to the client. And make sure that we're producing a final deliverable that is helpful to them.
Yeah.
In a reasonable but not hair on fire kind of way.
So Cynthia, just sincere personal appreciation to you, because I know you were also one of the work group chairs, co-chairs for the greenhouse. I know you were running full out for the last 3 months, and even this week, I know you had a lot of commitment, so I really appreciate you kind of diving into the deep end on this one as well. Thank you.
Happy to do it.
Thank you. All right. So I know Craig Holland wasn't able to join us today. I was wondering, Gwen, if we could call on you or Margot in the room, just to give us a really brief, update of your discussions and process for the.
Absolutely. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can, Gwen.
Wonderful, wonderful. So yes, both Gwens, Craig, Barry, and Margot had a good discussion yesterday, and it was interesting. It was a little hard for us almost to stay on point because there's so much we think we can do. And what we decided was to do sort of a stepwise fashion of how to answer the question or how to draft a charge around the question of how can EPA facilitate getting all of this new and existing funding out to communities in need. And so that brought up several questions in terms of right off the bat, are we talking about grants? Are we talking about loans?
Gwen.
Yes.
Could you pause for a second? I'm going to ask our IT people to fix some IT problems internally, which is very loud. So hold on for a second, Gwen.
Absolutely.
Gwen, could you say something, just maybe testing?
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
We're still working on it, Gwen.
Okay.
Gwen, could you try again?
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Gwen, keep on testing us.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. I feel like I'm back
Gwen.
in my.
Gwen, before you continue, I just also want to point out, I don't know whether you can see everyone in the room. The other 2 members of the board are in person, I think.
And Dennis, 3.
3. Dennis was.
Gwen. Oh no, maybe not. Sorry, I'm confused.
Who are the group? Gwen and Margot and Barry. That's right. Barry was in the room as well yesterday. So the 3 other members of the team are in the room today.
Okay, great. Well, and I will certainly defer to them if they have more to add. But basically, we had a lively discussion for about an hour, hour and 15 minutes. trying to answer the question, as I said, of the top line question of how to get money into communities in need in the most efficient and impactful way. And so we're brainstorming how to put that into a charge question for us to be able to serve EPA. We identified possible clients within the agency is obviously the CFO's office, based on Faisal's discussion with us, I guess now 2 days ago, but also the Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights. We also expanded it to include possibly CEQ, DOE, and HUD. That may be a little ambitious, but recognizing that a lot of this funding, recognizing that communities need funding from several places and they have issues and concerns from several places, we wanted to see how broadly we might be able to address those concerns. So in terms of a preliminary outline for the charge question, like I said, how to have more money get out the door into the communities of need, and then lay out some options that would include things like intermediation groups, whether they're NGOs, private entities, academic institutions, et cetera. I think the big question there becomes, as I said earlier, are we talking about grant money or is it a situation where some of these institutions turn grant money into loan options in order to multiply the effect in communities, and what that might do in terms of pros and cons for communities that would be on the receiving end in terms of the ability to pay back that money, the structure to be able to satisfy the audits surrounding that money and everything else. In addition to some intermediary options, we talked about improving the way that the word gets to communities about the availability of funding. And we talked about building capacity of these communities, as well as addressing the accountability barriers or finding ways to make recommendations to address those barriers. We had several questions, I want to say about 8 or so questions that came up during our discussion. And so as we hopefully in the next step get to talk with a representative of that proposed client base, whether it's a few people from each of the offices at EPA that we talked about, there are just some basic questions that we wanted to ask, like, can intermediaries leverage these grant funds with debt and equity, those kinds of things? Are we limiting the scope if we only focus on grant making organizations? What are some of the grant rules at EPA? And we talked at length about what is precedent versus what is actually law. And I will say this just from my experience, ensuring that the agency is not just simply following a path based on the notion that we've always done it that way or we've never done that before, when in fact there are no legal prohibitions about thinking of a new way to service communities. So it was a very lively discussion. I invite Gwen and Barry and Margot, she's in the room, to add to what I've said. I think the next step, or Craig was our note taker, and the next step is for us to all digest these notes, provide some comment, possibly draft, take this outline and draft a very sketchy charge question, and then get that in front of somebody either from the CFO's office or the new equity office and get some preliminary feedback so we can then move forward into drafting a final charge. But Gwen, Barry, Margot, anything?
I think you captured it perfectly, Glenn, and it's just really exciting. I think there's a lot of opportunities, not just for EPA, but cross agencies. So really excited to be working with Gwen and Craig on this.
Sounds like a rich discussion. Thank you so much, all of you, for volunteering on the spot to take this on. And I think this will be another kind of the art of crafting the charge questions, and the deliverable will be, since it's such a massive topic, will be a lot of the work initially. So we look forward to tracking your progress and having a charge to vote on in the future.
Yes, and since Craig rolls off soon. My goal
Yes,
is to
you
have as
need
much
to-
done by June as possible.
Good on you.
Yeah, and I would just ask the exploratory work group members that I would make the same comment that I made to Cynthia and Janet regarding the timeline. And hopefully there could be a charge that we could vote on in the virtual meeting that the water folks are interested in. So perhaps we can align.
Keeping some alignment.
Yeah, alignment in the timeline.
Yeah, we'll stay in touch on timelines.
Yeah, please let us know and we'll arrange meetings as necessary to do our best to meet it.
Great. Oh, Cynthia, yes, go ahead.
Thanks, Cynthia Kohler, Water Now, for the record. This is a really exciting charge. I'm sorry I missed the conversation yesterday, but I want to be sure that our two exploratory groups are coordinating really closely. It might even be useful for us to maybe talk offline about having a couple of us, serve on both, because some of these questions are exactly the ones we're doing in the water charge. So you guys have a much bigger mandate. You're looking more broadly across agencies, which I think is exactly right. I strongly support what you guys are doing. Some of this at the same time is almost verbatim what we're looking at in the context of the SRFs, for example.
Yes.
The issue about how to get funds moving efficiently, especially this big, huge chunk of money that's going through the existing SRFs and what that means for effectiveness and efficiency and for meeting missions. The point that was made about, being accountable and how it's important to be accountable, but also the barriers that creates. They're identical questions. So I think if people are up for it, maybe we can have some of us who are working on these. I'm not sure how much overlap, if any, there is on these work groups already.
We could do maybe a co-chairs meeting or with a couple of folks. Yeah, we could have,
Right. I don't know if that overlap came up yesterday, but I just want to point out that at least certainly in our subgroup, and even sounds like a little bit in Janet's, these exact issues around efficiency, effectiveness, reaching low-income communities, it's a huge part of what we're trying to do with this bill money. So
we had the discussion ahead of forming the work group around, one approach would be to take the media approach, like tackle this, in water and air, or do we do this kind of cross-cutting?
Right.
And so the exploratory work group decided to do cross-cutting, but you're absolutely right. You all are focused on the SRF. So there could be a way to kind of coordinate and divide and conquer on that piece.
Yeah, I'm excited. The idea of having more minds that are on this that are specifically focused on the EJ piece, I think that's fantastic. Yeah. But I just want to make sure we're not, the last thing we want to do is come up with recommendations that don't work. But I think the opportunity to do these together is fantastic, so that we are coming up with recommendations that are, that reinforce one another.
Yeah.
And
go ahead, Gwen. No, go ahead.
I definitely think that's possible. And one thing I neglected to mention was when we started our discussion and we were talking about the types of intermediaries, states were one of them. And there was the thought of a possible deliverable being handbooks for each of the different types of intermediaries, if we go that route. And the way that would be helpful or intersect with what you're doing is obviously it could then address the state and the SRFs in the water context, because the other thing we have to think about is the rules for distributing money differs based on the statutes or based on the regulations. So
exactly.
I think you're right that as we get deeper into the water side of things and the state's role in that, then we should be aligned, and we can. I'm more than happy to connect with you to make sure that there is overlap and consistency, as opposed to it appearing as two different deliverables.
Great, awesome.
And,
we'll
and
make that happen.
one consideration for each of the exploratory work groups, or as we get into the charges, we might want to hear more from WEJAC on their scorecarding or baselining that they're doing. And, that might help just educate and inform the work of these different charge groups.
Yeah, as a matter of process, the other issue that at least I sat in on the other exploratory group discussion yesterday, and with Gwen and Craig, and at the end, and what I took on is to try to make sure that we have the right set of partners at EPA
That can help
that could help us refine this. And I think, Cynthia, the place where we could coordinate very clearly upfront is the charge questions, so that the scoping of the things that you're mentioning and Gwen just mentioned are clear as to what each group's doing.
Yeah.
And then there could be complementary work that could be done through like the co-chairs steering group that we had set up with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And what also I thought of yesterday evening was that even the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, this was a consideration that was brought up. And there's going to be, I think Jahi Weiss yesterday or 2 days ago, mentioned that there might be some follow-up, and I suspect that this part of it is going to be, just guessing, that could be one of the follow-ups that we can talk to them about, because there's so many, all of these programs are struggling with the same issue. And the key concepts regarding intermediaries, I think, are where this big overlap is. But as Gwen points out, because we have different statutes and different programmatic requirements, that's where the kind of the differentiation might occur.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the overlap is not only around the third-party intermediaries, although that's a very strong one, but also the kind of the other through point that I see listening to Gwen and just the conversation we just had in our work group is, this issue of ensuring that of addressing the burdens associated with accountability. I hate to say that because accountability is important, but it does create these challenges. We had a conversation
with Faisal about that. Yes.
It definitely creates challenges, and and then the whole issue about smaller, mid-sized communities that have not historically or traditionally availed themselves of federal resources because the process just appears to be so daunting. There's only so far that third-party intermediaries can address that. There's also just how do you get those communities feeling comfortable engaging with those processes, and how do you make I guess what I'm trying to say badly is how do you make those processes more inviting and more accountable themselves to those communities? I think that's the other significant through point. And I'm sure there's others, but that's the one that
wholeheartedly. Yeah, that's my focus. Is the word needs to get out, and the comfort level needs to increase so that more people can be successful in their applications. It's not enough that they apply if there are still problems, which is where the third element of capacity building comes into play, in my view.
I agree. We're gonna have a lot of agreement around this.
Yeah, and as Dennis mentioned, I think yesterday, there are these like horror stories out there, right, that become urban legends, but rightly so, because they were rooted in, issues, but they take hold, and how do we change that dynamic, but make sure that there is a good experience had by folks who do come through the process. Yeah. And then, of course, this all overlaps with the work of NEJAC, as we heard yesterday in the briefing. So that's another point of potential coordination, maybe, cross briefings, or we'll leave it to Ed, our fearless DFO, to figure out the how.
and I think this is where, Cynthia, yesterday I shared with the board members that we should look at the SOPs again, because I think trying to make sure in these types of responsibilities where there's a lot of overlap, we're always trying to figure out as a board what is really
our best.
Yeah, what you're offering and the best things that you could offer to the agency, as opposed to what NEJAC and WEJAC and what the program offices also bring. So that's how I always recommend that you narrow the set of work that you do, because you don't have bandwidth to do everything. So I'm always very cautious about asking you to take everything on. So I know Cynthia wants to take everything on from time to time. She's shaking her head, but that's not her action. So anyway, so so that will be my key role that I'll play on this particular set of exploratory questions, is that trying to get the right people to be involved. And I think CFO, whether they like it or not, they're going to have to get involved. I will talk to Faisal about this, because lot of the balancing that's needed in the exploratory group discussions that I've heard is really about accountability and a lot of the barrier that's associated with the procedure. So that they need to be a part of this process. So, but other than that, I think there are other groups that are obviously I think we need to be involving them as well. And I'll take that on.
Yeah. All right. I think that may conclude our business. It was an extraordinarily productive meeting. Again, this is a board that does a lot of work. So I thank all of you for your engagement, both virtually and here in the room, and for the work and the time commitment that you put in during this meeting and obviously outside this meeting as well. I don't believe we have any public comments.
Do we have any public comments? Okay,
so we have no public, which, is unusual that we have had a spate of intense public commenting through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which has been great to see as well. I think that's it then, Ed.
And I think in terms of public comments, I think we have provided even the written comments that have come in since December for this meeting, and we'll continue to do the same. That if there are other public comments that come in, just because of our experience with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and our desire to be as transparent as possible, we will accumulate those comments, but provided when we have our public meeting. So whether it's a virtual meeting or the summer meeting, if there are additional comments, we'll make sure to provide them all to you and to the public as well on our website. So I hope that's okay in terms of frequency. If you would like it as they come in, I don't know if we have the bandwidth to do that. My only final thought is that, again, I really appreciate all of you, but before I get effusive about that, I do want to remind everyone that we are looking to have our next meeting outside DC. And I know with the virtual world, we have lots of participants already watching, but the purpose of us going out to outside the Beltway in every other meeting is to ensure broader participation of public in other parts of the country, as well as having, as I mentioned on at the beginning of the meeting 2 days ago, that we'd like to have one of the board members or a group of board members host us so that there are some additional activities like field visits that are available and so on. So in that light, I do have to say that she didn't want me to turn to her, but Phyllis said the board members ought to at least consider maybe San Antonio. Did you want to say something about that?
Yes, well, I did think about San Antonio. It does have a lively downtown, obviously, for those who've been there before. I guess I would want to ask just clarification about what time frame, because I don't want you to come in August when it's 100 degrees. So that just putting it out there, it could be warm. Just to give
but she's not really pitching this the way that I thought she was. I think the thing that she was really interested in having folks do is if you could. So
we do have a what we call a rain to drain tour. For those of you who don't know, San Antonio sits on a prolific limestone aquifer where we get approximately now 50% of our water. So what this tour takes is from where the runoff goes into the aquifer, how we distribute it, pump it and distribute it, and then how we dispose of it, which is at one of our and it has been recognized by the EPA as I don't know the term, but a award-winning treatment center where we use that and again, I'm not in operations, but the water is used to recycle, sent downstream for other uses. We have composting, and then we have biogas all at one location. So it takes you through rain to drain, how we get from the beginning to the end. It is all day. So I have to add caution about, could you narrow it down? I don't know. I don't run it, so I'll have to find that out. But it is very interesting. We also do brackish desalinization. We do have a plant there, and it does have a visitor center. But all you see are membranes. You don't see a whole lot. It's interesting to review the process, but it's not a whole lot to see. So just some things to think about. But again, I did want to caution about the timing because it could be warm.
And I wanted Phyllis to share that because that's sort of what we're looking for in terms of if you're going to suggest a site to us, because Tara's already looking into sites from EPA's interest. But if you have sites like that, and I thought that was just a fantastic side trip that would be part of the knowledge base as well as understanding kind of underground the things. What she said captured so many of the issues that we've been talking about. Yeah. I thought it was very interesting. See, Phyllis, it was not about the Riverwalk. I just want you to know, although Riverwalk's fantastic.
But there is obviously ample hotel and location downtown.
That's actually very important.
And lots of restaurants and things to see. And you can see the Alamo, which when you get in person, it's like, oh, really, is that it? But because it's much smaller than what you think it looks like. But it is very historic. So I would welcome the opportunity for y'all to come if that is something y'all are interested in doing.
Thank you for that offer.
Tara, did you want to add?
Oh, David Zimmer.
David Zimmer.
Which we couldn't.
Sure, just kind of as a parting comment to add to Phyllis's comment, for anybody that's been there, Phyllis, I would also say that you guys have an incredibly interesting lock system on the canal that really protects downtown and the Riverwalk from the excessive stormwater and flooding potential. So whether you're on the clean water side or the drinking water side, San Antonio has a lot to offer in terms of these, potential side trips.
Thanks for that.
And I always love suggestions west of the Mississippi because other intent is that we try to get away from the Eastern time zone because Carrie kept suggesting cities in the Eastern time zone. I hope the Western colleagues will acknowledge some interest in that. So anyway, so thank you for that. And I think I have no further comments. And if you have suggestions, just please email them to me and to Tara, and we will put it in.
And start looking,
matrix.
If you've got dates, kind of no-go dates, we are going to need to poll for that as we hone in on that date.
And usually, as we talked about, it's usually in September or October, not August, that we try to shoot for. And some of it has to do with our budget in terms of budget cycle and so on. And as you know, our EPA budget year ends at the end of September and the new year begins. So that sometimes that affects our decision making. But that's the usual time frame that we've had meetings in the past, in the September and October. So not August. All right, that's it. And do you have any parting thoughts?
No, thank you for a great meeting. Thank you to our 6 members who we won't see in person. We will miss you. We'll miss your wisdom and your expertise and your collegiality and your collaboration. And thank you, everybody, for your service.
Safe travels. And with that, I'll adjourn our January 23 meeting.